have an incredible lineup of speakers.
Martha Stewart, everyone.
We welcome to the stage Akon,
former First Lady of the United States.
Every single one of them is an explorer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Elevate Live. We have an amazing show for you here today. We have Silicon Valley media mogul Kara Swisher joining us live on today's talk. Kara's going to chat about the role of big tech in today's environment of COVID, gig workers, and just who she thinks is doing a great job and who could to really step up their game. Really excited to hear Kara's thoughts. At Elevate, our mission is to unite the world's innovators to solve society's greatest challenges. I couldn't think of a greater challenge of our generation than what we are dealing with COVID. So now more than ever, we need the fact-based information to make decisions to move society forward. I am so excited to share with you who we have coming up next week. We've got a special edition of Elevate Live. We're going to focus on founder-friendly financing. I know a lot of the tech community is worried around getting the much needed capital they need to continue to grow their businesses. We've got Michelle Romanow from Clearbank, founder and president. We've got Alkarim Jivraj from Espresso Capital. And we've got Kaz Nijan from Shopify Capital, who just launched their new program. All of these companies are making capital available at founder-friendly terms. So more on that next week. Also, I want to encourage everyone to join in the conversation. We want to make this as interactive as possible. We are monitoring all social channels, so you can use the hashtag #ElevateLive to share your comments and feedbacks on the show. For those of you who want to ask Kara a question directly, you can just go to the Zoom tab. There's a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Put in your question. Kara's going to answer anything that comes up. And if you want to support an existing question, you could just thumbs it up, and we'll make sure we get to the most pressing questions. Okay, so it brings me great privilege to introduce Kara Swisher, respected journalist, entrepreneur, Silicon Valley media mogul. You know, Kara, what I love most about you is your fearless approach to journalism. You ask, big tech leaders the hard, pressing questions that are on all of our minds. You do not back down to anybody. And we're really excited to have you on the show today. Kara, as I've mentioned, is such an icon in our industry. She hosts 2 amazing podcasts, Recode Decode and Pivot. Her and her partner, Scott Galloway, joined us at Elevate this past September. They led their first international recording of their podcast to a stand-up room only audience at Elevate Tech Fest this September. I think Kara referred to Elevate as the South by Southwest of Canada. We had wonderful guests, including Michelle Obama, Martha Stewart, Grammy Award-winning artist Akon, back in the days where we could gather live. And so we're super grateful for Kara joining us today. She is the producer of the Code Conference. And hopefully today, it's a very exclusive invite only. Hopefully Kara will send me an invitation to the one she's hosting later on this year. And hot off the press, Kara just announced that she is the editor-at-large for New York Magazine. Welcome to the show, Kara Swisher.
How you doing?
I'm doing great, Kara. How are you doing? Where in the world are you?
Good.
Where are you coming in from?
I'm in D.C., in Washington, D.C.
Nice. Before we get into our more, formal conversation, how are you doing? Like, how has COVID impacted you, your family? I know you have a new addition. Mm-hmm. How are you doing through all this personally?
I'm fine. I mean, look, I'm a lucky person. I have money. I've got a job. I haven't, been laid off. It's hard to lay me off, though. I'm fine. I think compared to other people, fantastic. It's not great to be at home with teenagers, but I have 2 teenagers and a baby. Baby's fantastic, has no idea what's going on. So it was very pleasant, very happy for me to be around a lot, and my partner. So it's fine. I mean, I think I think people realize how things can stop and get a sense of society stopping cold pretty easily right now. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to wrap things around and deal with their anxiety and stress that comes with this. And at the same time, there are people on the front lines who are really doing amazing work, and at the same time putting themselves in harm's way that we have to really focus on. So I don't really like to complain too much about my life.
No, fair enough. I think we do feel fortunate as well. We have, meaningful work. If our families are staying healthy, there are a
Sure.
lot more people that are being impacted. Let's start off with your thoughts on our governments, whether in the U.S. or Canada. Who's doing this right? Who is totally messing this up? Give us your initial thoughts.
Well, the United States. I mean, I think the stuff that's happening with the Trump administration is just disturbing on every level, but it's sort of a continuation. It's sort of a nightmare scenario for a lot of Americans, not every American, certainly. But I think, the stream of lies, the stream of misinformation, even around basic things like hydroxychloroquine being pushed by the president, when obviously new testing is showing it's quite dangerous to experiment on people. And to everything that everything's going to be fine. I think the slowness. So I think our government is it's shown on a federal level how much we've let down our citizens, including me, including all of us. Certain countries, I think Germany has done an amazing job. I think Angela Merkel likes science, and she is a scientist and has a scientific background, and they have been handling it much better in terms of giving good, tough information to their citizens and asking for sacrifices. And being very cogent and very clear about what needs to happen. They've been doing a lot of testing. I think our testing situation in this country is appalling. I wrote a column in the New York Times about it. I tried to get tested, and I had to know a guy, which is just ridiculous in a modern democracy as wealthy as this one. I'm not as familiar with what's going on in Canada, but it seems like Justin Trudeau is saying the right things. I think you have a lot more comedy among people in your country, and so there's that. And we're still bruising from partisan battles and news organizations that put out bad information for political reasons. So problematic.
Yeah, we've been looking at the patterns as well too, and it seems like that countries led by women presidents, prime ministers, you mentioned Angela in Germany or New Zealand, most of the Nordic countries seem to be. Do you think there's a correlation to gender in terms of leadership in a time of crisis?
I don't think there's a genetic reason that women are better at doing this, but I do think, they've worked hard to get into those roles. It's been, an uphill battle for a lot of women to get into top roles in countries. And I think they just have a calmer mentality around this particular thing. In New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern or Angela Merkel, or even the state governors here, like Gretchen Whitmer, she's getting enormous political pushback from the right wing, and she still continues to hold her ground. All over this country, there's lots of leaders. Whether, by the way, Mike DeWine in Ohio is doing a great job, being very clear, being very cognizant of all the pressures and speaking very clearly to people. So it's not, or Larry Hogan in Maryland is being terrific. He's a Republican also. So it's not, necessarily, I think the governors, if anybody in this country is doing a good job, it's the governors, and it's the federal government that's holding everybody hostage. Just today, Bill Barr, who I consider just beneath, he's just contemptuous. He's just a contemptuous person. He's saying he may push governors who don't open their states. He might do some Justice Department action. It's crazy. It's just actually crazy. And I think the governors of this country, for the most part, especially the big states who have been hardest hit, have been doing a really good job. And then you have a governor like the one in Georgia who didn't even understand the virus and now is pushing to open the state without proper testing or and not following along the guidance of the federal government itself. And so, you've got a mixed bag. It just sort of shows all the problems. It accelerates the problems we have here already, just as it does in the business sector. It accelerates the political discord. And now it's going to, and also it's going to accelerate all the business trends that were happening before COVID-19.
Yeah, listen, we know that COVID is not just a government problem. This is something that's affecting all of humanity. Let's talk a little bit more about our industry and the role that you think that big tech has a role to play in helping solve the health crisis. Give us your thoughts on their responsibility.
Well, there's only so much tech can do. Obviously, these people are extraordinarily wealthy and should be giving money, hopefully without releasing a press release every time they do. That's a little irritating. But, they should be giving of their vast wealth to help people. And that's just charity. That's philanthropy, charity, really. They should be trying to figure out how they can best help in terms of data collection, and how to help the government figure this out and what tools they can bring to bear. There's stuff that Apple and Google is working on. It's still unclear how that's developing. I think a few weeks from now we'll understand that better around tracking, which I think is a great idea as long as it has privacy protections. There's a lot of other tech companies that are trying to get in on it. Some companies that are trying to take advantage of the situation and move in areas. I think in general, you can look at someone like Amazon. Great, they're doing amazing delivery. Worrisome that some of the workers are in trouble there, but that's going to be an issue for everyone who has delivery. They just happen to be the most prominent. At the same time, they proved invaluable to delivering things to a lot of people. I think one of the biggest issues is the fact that there are, this gig economy, which has been, fueled by tech, has shown, again, these accelerating trends that are already happening, that there's a vast amount of people that are unprotected in this country. And I was interviewing someone yesterday, Nicole Hannah-Jones from the New York Times, who's written a lot about the income inequality. And we call them essential workers now. And before she considers them sacrificial workers. We never treated them as essential before. Suddenly they're essential. We treated them badly, not giving them enough money, giving them less than minimum wage, no protections. And now, of course, they're essential to us when we look down upon them in regular times. And so it's a really interesting time to really rethink what America or the world should look like going forward, and especially protecting people's health and welfare.
Yeah, you talked about the large donations. We've seen Jack Dorsey donated $1 billion, 28% of his net worth. We've seen Bill Gates step in and fund the shortfall that the Trump administration basically pulled their WHO funding, and Bill Gates, billionaire philanthropist, falls in. Is that the role we want for these billionaire philanthropists?
Bill Gates. No, Bill Gates has been doing an amazing job. I have to say, but he's been teed up for this. This is something he's talked about for years, pandemics. And I was at that TED speech where he talked about it and was very shaken by it. I remember at the time shaken by it and thinking he was 100% right. And his organization, the Gates Foundation, along with his wife, Melinda Gates, has been doing a ton of stuff around public health. And so it's really a shame that we have to get rich people to dig us out of things when our government is the one that should be doing that and doing it fairly and giving money to the people that deserve it. There's a big mess in handing out this, just even the payroll protection money. And obviously the checks getting out, it's such a small gesture when they're doing so much more for large businesses. But I do think Bill Gates has really sort of tried to be a leader without trying to be political, although he has to be at this point. He did put out a statement, a tweet about not opening up too soon. He thought it was dangerous. It's great that he's doing this, but why do we have to have that happen? There's all these debates around how much these big wealthy corporations should be taxed. That's a debate that was happening previous to this. It's going to happen after it. But right now, any help, any port in the storm kind of thing. Although I think Bill Gates is special in terms of being highly qualified and highly knowledgeable about this stuff. And so I tend to, I don't love it when we have to have billionaires come in and save us. But in this case, he's actually someone who probably knows much more than the federal government in this time on what to do.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more. We think Bill Gates has been doing great work for many years. For those of you who have not seen that TED Talk, Bill Gates pretty much called this pandemic in 2015. He described that it was the greatest threat. It's not war, but it's going to be a virus that gets us, and just to see it play out and just not taking action, right, until now that we're all sort of reacting to this devastating thing. You wrote an article in the New York Times, and you had this great line that said that startups and the tech community and stuff should permanently socially distance themselves to the back of the line. With all this PPE money coming, and in Canada, the wage subsidy, why do you think startups shouldn't be participating in some of the government handouts that are coming?
Because they have other avenues in order to get money. This is not a group of people that, if you're a small business, a pizzeria or a deli or a hardware store, you don't have a VC coming in giving you money or being able to do it. They don't fund these small businesses. If you're a startup, you knew the game when you were starting. And so as much as it's important to stay in business, you have to deal with it as a venture-backed firm. And I think some people are looking at it, trying to keep jobs, but at the same time, these are the people that have much more access to capital than small businesses. And so, a lot of VCs don't want these startups to take these things either. Some of the startups don't want to the reason they're doing them is they don't want to do deals with VCs that would be uneconomic for them in terms of their wealth. And so they have access to capital. So anyone who has access to capital should not be, eating at the public trough. That's my feeling.
I hear you, Kara. I'm going to disagree on this one. I think startups need to do whatever they can to survive. They've paid into the system through payroll taxes, income taxes. Mm-hmm. And if they have an opportunity to get some of the government funding, assuming that they qualify, because I would not want to be going to my VC, doing an internal round right now that pretty much dilutes my equity, like someone put a fire hose into my martini, because they're going to pretty much get wiped out, I think, if they go to equity investors at this time.
Yeah, that's true, but it's not, a deli doesn't have that choice. That you have a choice, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, You're not going to be a multimillionaire, but if your business is good, when things recover, you'll be fine and have access to capital. That deli is gone, and those people's businesses are gone, or those, they don't have the choices that a lot of these overeducated startup people have, and they just are. They have plenty of possibility, and the reason they got into it was it was a riskier venture, and this is what risk is about, is figuring it out. And I think that if you have a great product, you're not going to get washed out in this. You're not going to get washed out. You may have temporary things happen to you. Look at something like Airbnb. They're doing everything they can to look at that business. Boy, is that hit on so many levels, on travel, on hotels, on lots of stuff. And, they're coping with it. I don't think they know they know the game they were playing when they got into this. And so they should stay in the same game and not suddenly have a different set of rules.
Yeah, listen to me. I think they definitely have more capital options. I'm a big fan of revenue financing, debt financing. We've got next week's show. We've got what we're calling founder-friendly financing. Companies like Clearbank, who use data to determine, based on the health of your business, how much capital should be available. They lend out to women and founders at 7 times the rate. Or Espresso Capital, who's replacing the Series A with $10 million non-dilutive, no board seats check. So I think that source of financing, I think, has been under-leveraged. And I think those better founder-friendly terms are hopefully going to be a bigger part of the capital mix as companies look at capitalizing their startups. So let's see how that shakes out. More on that next week. Kara, one of my favorite things about Pivot, they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I love when you do wins and losses. Let's talk about this in the COVID era. Who do you think fails? I'm sorry. Who do you think? Yeah. What are the wins and fails in your predictions? How is this gonna play out for some companies?
Well, we've talked about this a lot on the show. By the way, what you're just saying is there's no reason VCs are going to try to grind startups. Like, why would you do that? Why would you try to kick them in the teeth in a crisis? You're not going when things return, and they will return. That person's going to remember it. So I don't see it's not a very good business plan to screw your startups. By the way, if you're thinking of the longer term, just to get a temporary advantage financially. So the wins, I think tech companies are going to be bigger than ever. Big tech is going to be bigger than ever. All the companies, Google, Facebook, are going to be able to really clear out the chaff now. They were already working on devastating so many businesses. Now they really can just put the final knife in. So I think they're going to be bigger than ever, most of the big tech companies. I think they're going to be more unfettered than ever, because I think government's not going to have the appetite to do regulatory initiatives after this for quite a while, including antitrust, fines, all the kind of things they were thinking of, legal laws, privacy laws, things like that. So I don't think there's going to be the energy to do that. And so I think the big tech is going to be a real win. Losses are media is going to get further ground down by companies like digital, especially digital media, by Facebook and others. Facebook and Google, essentially. I think retail is going to get ground down by companies like Amazon, and they're going to have a really hard time recovering. You saw Neiman Marcus went bankrupt. There should be tons and tons of bankruptcies in the retail space, and then that will have iterations in commercial real estate and all kinds of cities tax revenues and things like that.
Yeah, listen, clearly big tech has been well positioned to work at home, digital, deliver their solutions digitally. COVID is going to, I think, accelerate them. You look at Amazon right now, who's trying to hire 100,000 more workers. They really much shut off the marketplace so they can focus on essential products. I mean, they can't even handle the volume of business they're getting. Clearly, they're going to be much stronger coming out of this. And even just seeing, you talked about it, it's feeling like, you had to know someone to get a COVID test. It almost feels like healthcare is turning into the nightclub industry where if you don't have a person to let you in, you're not going to get tested. Amazon bought 100,000 test kits for their employees. I mean, is that where this is going, or is big tech now going to replace the health care needs that government should be providing? I mean, should I be buying health care kits for my team at Elevate? Is that the world where the world is going?
I think this is every man for himself is, I think, the attitude right now, at least on the federal level. The states should do it. It's like it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous to even contemplate that this is where it's at. I mean, I think a lot of companies, I've been hearing like media companies that are trying to go back into production of Hollywood stuff, productions, they're going to buy up tests and they're going to test everybody on the set every day. Like they're going to have to pay for that. It's going to be a cost of doing business. Makes sense if you have to make things and you want to make sure people are healthy and you don't want to be liable, test everybody. And so all these businesses are going to have to cope by themselves rather than have a government where it should be easy to go into like a Walgreens and get tested every day. You should have that available to you. At a very low cost. But that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen, not with this government at least. And so it's going to we're going to have to rely on companies to do this kind of thing. And some companies will be equipped to do it and some companies won't. And that will, again, further separate the winners from the losers.
Yeah, you talked about gig workers becoming essential services now. And listen, I know many gig workers, some will drive for Uber, and then they might have a side hustle with Instacart doing groceries. I mean, who's taking care of the gig workers, right? They have often multiple gigs. Who's supplying them with test kits?
Nobody. They don't get health care. They don't get they get treated like, they're sacrificial. They're not essential workers. They're sacrificial workers. This is what Nicole Hannah-Jones said. And I think it's 100% right. We're just sacrificing them. And then, pushing really, I feel so sad to watch those protesters. People can protest, but it's suicidal what's happening with those people. Like really, they're ignorant about the science because they've been spoon-fed a series of propaganda things that just aren't true. And then going out like that, they're going to get sick. And then what happens? You know what I mean? They have to rely on the healthcare system to do so, and creating even more of a crisis because of the lack of ability to understand the consequences. But the gig workers, nobody's fault here, but it's really who takes care of them? Who takes care of them? Where do they get? This is why we need to really rethink health insurance in this country, at least, and the idea of benefits around these things. We have been riding for the past 12 years. People have been getting Uber rides for $4 across town. It doesn't cost $4. It's just that you rode off their backs. And they endured it for various reasons in order to make ends meet. And you were taking from them. And now now you'll see what it costs. I mean, Uber is not going to cost $4 to go across town. It's just not. You've been taking advantage of delivery service and prices at Amazon, all kinds of stuff. And the free isn't free. And this idea that it is just, it's off the backs of other people in some ways. And what we don't want to do is create this serf and lord kind of world, which we are moving towards, where people like me can stay at home and work from home. And my job I've been working from home for a decade. And others just can't. They must go out and get on public transportation. They must go out. And if we don't provide them, if that's the case with masks and tests and healthcare and things like that, it's just, I don't know I know what we're doing, but I think it's pretty appalling.
Yeah, one of the things that we get asked a lot is, when does this end? We hosted a CEO roundtable with Toronto Mayor Tory around when does he open up the economy? And listen, the answer is that nobody really knows, but I do want to go to our audience, and we're going to do a poll. We want to make this as interactive as possible. On your screen, you're going to see 4 options, one very optimistic, one very pessimistic, and then everything in between. And I'd love for our audience to take 30 seconds and weigh in on how they think COVID ends while we're collecting that information. I'm just going to provide a little bit of context, and I'm going to go over to you, Kara. When we looked at this at Elevate, there were really 2 pandemics that we studied. There was the SARS epidemic that started off similarly in Asia. It did affect Toronto greatly. The World Health Organization put us on a red zone of not to travel. And if you follow that pandemic, it sort of ran its course. And by July of that year, in 2003, the pandemic pretty much disappeared. We didn't have a vaccine. We didn't solve it. We got lucky, and society returned back to normal. But when you look at 1918 and the Spanish flu, which was far more devastating, if you look at the patterns of the first wave, it actually is mirroring in a lot of ways of what we're experiencing today with COVID. It started in the winter season. It carried from Asia to all around the world. And by late spring, the first wave ended. The economy opened up, society went back to work. But it wasn't until the second wave, there was 3 waves, but it was the second wave that was the most deadly, right? Reportedly, 100 million people died through the Spanish flu. A majority were in the second wave, representing 5% of humanity. And then again, after that died down in 1919, in January, February, we had a third wave, and it was bigger than the first wave. So people are thinking this is going to be a one and done, maybe. People are thinking we're going to get, a vaccine. It took us 5 years to get Ebola and 4 years to get mumps. Like, it may not be as quick as we all hope. Kara, what are your thoughts? How and when does this end?
I have no idea. I'm sorry. I'm not a scientist, and I don't know. I think I read a lot. It looks like it's going to come back again in the fall. And especially if, oafs like the governor of Georgia decide to open it up and let people lick telephone poles or whatever. It just depends on how we handle it. There's got to be mitigation. There's got to be pushing toward treatments. There's some promising treatments, but none of them are really clear yet of how to, at some point people cope, just like in the AIDS crisis, people immediately died and then they figured out how to care for people better. And I think that's what's going to happen, how to care for people better with more efficacy. I think that'll be critical, is treatment, whether not cure, not vaccine, but treatment in terms of how we get people through the system, where most of the people just have this sort of heavy duty flu, and the others who get really sick, we're able to handle it in a better way, in a more efficient way. This long argument about ventilators, for example. Look, no one wants to get on a ventilator. Don't wish for a ventilator in any way. It's mostly a death sentence for a lot of people. Another thing we have to do is think really hard about how we want to slowly move people and carefully move people so that there is some level of social distancing happening, and then addressing the economic concerns, which are massive too, by the way. Let's not pretend that it's not incredibly stressful to the point of deadly not to have people working and not out and about. And so, I think what we have to do is, if we could do massive testing, if we could get that in place, if we could understand the treatments, if we could practice a level of social distancing that minimizes and puts things in the way of everybody getting the virus as quickly as in this sort of cascading way, that would go a long way. And I think, I guess if they did it right, you could open things up and hope for the best as you go into the fall. If you kept to those things and you were strict. My experience with humanity is they are not strict. You're going to see people this summer running around the beach, and then you're going to see a whole bunch of sick people after that, right? That's what's going. It seems like that's what's going to happen, and that's how humans tend to react to things. And then we'll have another whole economic downturn because of it. So I think we should have to just be careful and cautious going into every one of these things, even though it makes us crazy to be inside.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think taking an incremental approach, wide scale testing, and even getting the antibody testing in place, because ultimately I do think it'll be those who have the antibodies that are able to go back and be productive members of society. We're going to go to our poll results today. Seems like we've got a moderate approach. 45% thought it was 3 to 12 months. The other 42% felt it was 12 to 24 months. So
Wow.
people on our we've got thousands of viewers today. We feel like it's going to be pretty. It's not a one and done. This is going to be something we deal with in the next
I
year or
think the
two.
middle one is probably correct. I think the middle one is it's how other things have gone. And I was I was a young person during the AIDS crisis, but I remember how that went. It was terrifying for the first part of it, and then people understood it better, had better science on it, had better data, and then were able to mitigate. And we still don't have there's such promising. We're so close to the cure for AIDS, but people have living with AIDS was something that became an expression, and this will be living with coronavirus, and hopefully that's what we'll be talking about, living with it. And beside it. But if we overindulge ourselves at the wrong time, it will do what it wants to do, and we will have no control of it. And we have to have some level of ability to control ourselves.
Okay, that's all the time we have for our chat, Kara, but we're going to go to our audience. We've got lots of questions on social and our Q&A. Our first question is around Facebook's announcement. I don't know if you saw that, but they basically banned live events or gatherings for their employees of up to 50 employees up until June 2021. Was that wise of them to do? Was that overly cautious? When do you see, us being able to gather? Is Facebook right on this one?
Why not be cautious? What do they do most things digitally, and of course, why not move to that? So why not just assume that that's going to be a thing going forward in general? Some of these events that you do together you don't need to do, actually. It's for morale or whatever. And I think they've just decided to become a much more digital heavy company, would be my guess. And why not? Why risk it? And then they can adjust it. If they give the worst case scenario, which is I think what they're doing, they can say, actually, March, whatever. Depends on where the vaccine is, but there's no reason. There's not going to be a vaccine until then, at least then, if not further down the line. So, I don't mind overly. It's fine to say you overreacted. I think.
Got it. In 2008, 2009, lots of great tech companies did emerge from that last recession. Our next question is from Ivana P. And she wants to know, where do you think the biggest opportunities for startups? If you're thinking of starting a company post this, where do you think the opportunities are going to be?
I've written a lot about this. I think probably obviously healthcare. There's tons of funding around healthcare and things like that. It'll probably over-index on that. I've always been this climate change tech person. I've written about it several times in the New York Times, and I really do feel like just the other day, just yesterday, there was a story about rising temperature levels. That's really the existential crisis of our day. This is a terrible crisis, but climate change is something that's really a substantive challenge for humanity. And so it seems to me that that's where I would focus on, although I don't know if that's where the payoff is. It would be interesting. New ways of doing entertainment would be interesting, because now everybody's sort of used to lesser levels of production. There's all kinds of areas like that. And I suspect that the concept of people working from home is now sort of something's happened. Or maybe people want to get the hell out of their house. I know I do.
Yeah. From Greg W., we've got a question from Toronto. Kara, what are your opinions about the concept of a digital passport or using our smartphones for contact tracing?
It's controversial because of the privacy elements of it, but I think that the thing is, we don't know enough about this immunity, so I don't know what to say. Like, some people may be immune, but maybe not. They don't know enough yet to be putting these kind of things into place. If we knew that you were immune and you were immune for 18 months or whatever before you got the vaccine, that would be great. But I think the issue is they don't know. This is a coronavirus with a lot of other coronaviruses. Always happens to be more deadly and more persistent and pernicious. So I don't think we know enough to do that, but I do think people need to be able to follow the money, follow the person, to see what the rate of infection is, what happened to the different people who got. So I think knowing that is critically important. I think in every pandemic, this is one of the biggest things. And the question is, how much privacy should we have doing this? Does it work if there's too much privacy? Which companies should be doing this, and things like that?
prior to COVID, misinformation was a challenge we were already dealing with. How do you feel? Jesse T from Montreal wants to know, do you think the public's tolerance around misinformation, particularly after COVID, is going to be a greater sensitivity to sort of crack down on fake news or misinformation?
Well, they should. Obviously, I think the social media companies have been doing a much better job on this. That means they can do it elsewhere, right? If they've done it here, they can do it elsewhere. I wrote a big column about Fox News because my mother watches Fox News. In the early weeks of this pandemic, she had bad information was going out, and she's over 80. And I was super worried for her. And so I wrote a piece about this. It's sort of, I call it, she was in the foxhole because they were putting out actually bad information, inaccurate information, and really dangerous information. And so then they've continued to do so. They pushed to hydroxychloroquine. And now they're suddenly silent on it because of testing showing that it's quite possibly dangerous. So I think, yes, I'm furious about that. And I wrote a column about it, and I got attacked by Sean Hannity, which is, I think, a badge of honor in some ways to be attacked by such an oaf. But it's really just, I'm furious about that information that was on that network that she watches, that they couldn't have the very lowest bar on good scientific information. You know, they can go on and on about Nancy Pelosi all they want, and she can have those opinions. But when it comes to healthcare and issues like that, they should be broadcasting accurate information about things. And I think people, this is going to have repercussions for years to come.
Yes, we got a question from Mary J. in New York, wondering about your thoughts of the venture capital industry. Are LPs going to be continuing to put more money? I mean, we've seen more capital than any time in history. How are venture capitalists sort of treating their dry powder? How do you see this impacting funding for the VC industry?
No, I think there's plenty of capital out there. There will be. And I think that they're in good shape. A lot of people have just raised funds. And so they're going to be able to pick and choose among some really great companies at much lower prices. I don't see that not happening. And I think founders are going to be a little more pressured on the numbers. And so I suspect there's going to be, a winnowing of bad venture capital and bad investments, but it gives them an opportunity to get rid of losers, right away. Like right now, they can take a hard look at some of the ones that aren't working. You saw SoftBank pulling back from WeWork, the funding they were going to do. You're going to see that all over the place.
Yeah, no, I definitely think, there's something a little bit of Darwinian about COVID. It is affecting our most vulnerable. It is going to wipe out many of our startups that probably, shouldn't have existed in the first place. I do think there's going to be a little bit of a pruning that does happen in this process. So I want to go to Megan over in Vancouver. She wants to know your thoughts around society's acceptance, assuming it's a digital passport. Are people going to be more tolerant around sharing their specific location data, who they were in contact with? Are people going to be willing to give up more privacy for public health and safety?
Well, they give up privacy for everything else, right? Get on TikTok or do whatever. So, yeah, sure. I mean, I think so. I don't know if they'll do it for healthcare reasons. I think that people, will do it for their own health, probably. We'll see. I mean, we'll see. People are very used to sharing, so I'm not sure why they wouldn't share this, especially if it makes them healthier. But there still should be concerns about privacy, but people seem unconcerned about the kind of stuff they give up every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Got
it. Jane from Montreal is an aspiring podcaster. She wants to know your thoughts of where you see the tech podcasting industry 5 years from now. Is it going to be a real medium, or what do you think how does it play out?
Well, it is a real medium. We're making a lot of money at this, millions of dollars. So, I think it'll go forward. I think we've grown actually during this coronavirus crisis. Interesting. Not every podcast. Some podcasts are down because there's commuting issues. There's people not being out in cars and things like that. So you're going to see a downturn in certain genres of it. I think true crime has been off, some others. But anything that's topical and newsy and gives people real insight on their phones is doing really well, I think. And so I think it'll just be bigger than ever. I think there's a huge audience. A lot of them are just new to the genre. Like most of the people who listen, I was just looking at a someone was giving me a presentation yesterday from Vox Media about where it is, and most of the people coming online have not listened for less than 6 months. And so I think it's enormous, and people are now trying things out. So I think it's a great. I've started it 5 years ago, and I feel good about it 5 years from now.
Awesome. Thank you. We were dealing with income inequality even prior to COVID, and often things like this in society further create a bigger divide. What are your thoughts around how do we address, the haves and the have-nots and the potential for an acceleration around income inequality?
Well, it's interesting because what COVID has done is accelerated trends that exist. Retail's in trouble. It's going to get worse. Media's in trouble. It's going to get worse. The streaming people people are going to do more of it. And so income inequality has been an issue in this country, at least in the United States and across the globe, but really in the United States, it's really pretty horrible for a long time. And so I think what we've created a permanent underclass here that has no way of standing up, and they are mired in debt. They're mired in bad education. They're mired in bad nutrition. And COVID affects, especially among young people. Obesity is one of the things that is linked to deaths of COVID among younger people, which, it's a straight, bright line to these kind of things of not taking care of your health, of not being taken care of actually by society. And so income inequality is, I think, one of the great pressing issues of our day. And when I tell a lot of rich people in Silicon Valley, and I've said this, I've repeated this week a lot, and I'm going to keep saying it, is you can either help this issue around income inequality, or you can bulletproof your Tesla. That's how it's going to go. And we do not want that to happen. Like, why does it have to happen? We need to tax these people more. We have to figure out good social programs. We have to bring up the poor and the disadvantaged in our society and give them a decent wage, decent jobs, and decent health care. I just don't see why it's even an argument.
It's our last question from Jennifer. She's a teacher in Barrie, Ontario. Now that kids are now required to sort of learn from home through online education, how do you see the post-COVID world impacting the education landscape in our country?
Get my kids back to school, get them out of the house. I have to tell you, it's terrible. My kids are, in a wealthy area. We have, they go to a private school. It's terrible. It's terrible. And for kids, especially disadvantaged kids, they don't have computers. They don't have internet access. They don't go to school. I was interviewing Nicole Hannah-Jones about this. They don't have they're missing schools and stuff like that. And so it's really important. It's the teaching relationship, the analog teaching relationship is critically important. Instruction is really important, and it's very hard to replicate online. And I listen to the classes, and they're trying their darndest to make it work, but it just doesn't. And so it's critically important, again, that we pay our teachers wages that they deserve to in this important endeavor of educating our kids. And I think it's never shown more clearly how important schools are, not just for education, but for socialization, for development. In some cases, with kids who are disadvantaged, for food and for an ability to at least have some advantage. I think this idea that we can put everybody online, kids online, it's a farce. I mean, every parent will tell you it's a farce. Like, it's not working well. It's not the worst if you have some money, but it's not great for anybody. Thank you. Come back to school, please, and wear a mask, but hopefully you can get back to school as soon as possible. And protect yourself first. Don't go back to school if you're going to be unprotected.
Awesome. Kara, listen, your wisdom was invaluable. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm looking forward to the day where we can see each other again in person.
Yes,
but I do appreciate. Yes. Hopefully
next
at
year
Code.
in Toronto. Next year, Code. Oh, we're going to move that. We're going to have to move it.
Yeah.
So next year. Next year.
2021. We're going to get past this. Fingers crossed.
The year. It's off the hook. 2021. Forget 2020. It didn't happen. It never happened. Yeah.
I love it.
So anyway.
You talked about our climate crisis, and so we couldn't agree more. In your honor, as a little token of our appreciation, we have planted the Kara Swisher Forest. In the Great Lakes Observatory. You literally have a forest with your name on it. Helping.
Oh, wow. Oh.
Yeah. So
it's
you're
today's
doing
Arbor Day, right?
Pardon me?
Yeah. That's
So you
today's
were
Arbor
doing
Day,
your
I
part.
think. Yeah.
Oh, is it Harvard?
Oh, well, good.
Great. Great.
Today is Arbor Day in the United States. Thank you. This is great. I'm very excited. I love a tree. Who doesn't love a tree? I'm looking forward to where I can lick trees again. That's one of my favorite things. I look forward to the day we can all get out and be together. Absolutely. And I appreciate this. This is really well done. And again, I'm at Kara Swisher on Twitter if you have any questions, any extra questions.
Absolutely. We've been promoting all of your social channels. We're going to do a little follow-up with lessons from Kara Swisher along with the recording of today's episode. We'll follow up in an email. I wanted to thank all of our viewers today. We're so grateful for the questions, for your attention. It's a great privilege
Wear your mask.
wear your mask, stay safe. Next week, we've got founder-friendly financing. We talked about Michelle Romanow from Clearbank. We've got Alkarim from Espresso Capital and Kaz from Shopify Capital talking about how to preserve your equity, maintain control of your company while getting the capital you need to grow your business. To register or to subscribe, go to elevate.ca/live. You will be able to hear all of our weekly podcasts coming right directly to you over the lunch hour. A special thanks to our executive producer, Lisa Zarzechny, and her incredible team for producing this. We want to continue the conversation online. We're going to be there. Go to any social network and go to use the hashtag #ElevateLive. But most importantly, take 1 minute to give us your feedback. We read every single comment. It's how the show gets better every week. So take a minute, fill out our survey, give us your feedback, tell us what you'd like us to focus on next, who you'd like us to have on the show. And in the meantime, let's stay healthy, let's stay safe, and let's take care of each other. Thanks so much. My name is Razor.